What's going on, everyone? It's me, Lone. Welcome to the official debut episode of LoneVaultRadio, a video games podcast where I invite my friends, other content creators, and industry colleagues to talk all things games. So we did a test run, we did a pilot episode, now is the real deal. And there was one person that I really wanted to get on. We had to organize it, but I'm glad that we could get it done. He needs no introduction, but I want to give him one anyways. YouTube extraordinaire, creator, reviewer, everything. MrMattyPlays, brother, what's going on, man? It's good to see you.
Dude? This is awesome. We were talking before how it's just like, this is like old times, like we both got our podcast going together and here we are reuniting once more. So I appreciate you even thinking of me, dude. It's good to be here. Good to see your face,
You as well, man. Ham radio days. Like those were the days, man, when we kind of were getting our start on YouTube, talking about Fallout 4 and everything. It takes me back, man. Honestly.
Yeah. It's so funny looking back at like all of the formats we went through too, like, all of our pixel art and stuff, or we were just like audio only. It's crazy we got by. Like the podcasting has changed so much. Like when you think about it in a way, I don't mean to like stroke our egos, but we were kind of like on the cutting edge of the podcasting before everyone had a podcast. Like we started one and I guess the standards were much lower back then. So we didn't need cameras and professional bikes. So we were just shooting the breeze. Yeah. Amazing times though. But it's good to be here coming full circle to do this new show with you.
Thank you so much, man. And look, as I said, I really wanted to get you on. I really wanted to get you on as the first kind of episode because we have all that history doing YouTube together, doing the Ham Radio podcast together. And I also kind of wanted this first episode to be about Avowed, Xbox, Bethesda, and if it was a Venn diagram, your interest and my interest very much line up. And of course, like we had all the history together with our channel. Yeah. So keen to get you on, bro. But first, I just want to shoot the shit with you and ask how you've been. Like, what have you been up to? You've been killing it lately. Of course, like you and I follow each other, DM each other all the time. But let's talk about MrMattyPlays. Let's talk about Retro Rebound hitting 200K, defining Duke as well. You're everywhere, bro. How the hell do you do it?
I own a planner. It's like my that's my cheat code. Yeah, like I always tell people that I just owning a planner and like penning in my day. And honestly, like I always say to people that the way I really get it done now is like I had trouble in my early days on YouTube, kind of like trusting and letting people like edit my content and stuff. But now that things have like really settled, I have a dedicated editor for Retro Rebound, a dedicated editor for my Mr. Matty channel. Mr. Matty was really like the shackle for me. Like that was tough for me to come up from there because, it's like, modern gaming news and stuff. So it was like very difficult to be like, how am I not grinding every single day while trying to keep this afloat in a manageable way? So getting a dedicated editor for that was like in a reasonable time zone similar to mine makes it where we can like get stuff recorded and out that same day. So it kind of opens up that figuring that out to enter this year, right? I've been doing this for so long, but figuring that out this year really knocked my schedule open. So now it's and we also sunset Retro Rewind, which was our movie channel. That gave me a ton more time. I really had to like dial things back. So it's funny, you're like, you're everywhere. I'm like, I have scaled down in my life a lot where like I get to just have like a lot more time to breathe. And it's been wonderful because I feel very rejuvenated to like go and talk games on Mr. Matty and do the retrospectives on Retro Rebound. And of course, defining Duke every week is kind of like the spine of my week. It all fits into each other. Like, you're staying so tapped into the news that your thoughts are always developing and evolving because the conversation just moves so fast nowadays. But honestly, in a lot of ways, I've been loving it more than ever. It's just been fun to have so many different things to talk about. I remember when we first started, we were like in this Bethesda bubble. So to kind of break out, like here we're sitting down and talk about like Avowed, and it's like, for us, that was like the dream. And so I guess I just keep my ambitions in check, and because they're not too crazy, I'm an easily satisfied person. So that's what I'm up to. That's how I've been doing. It's been really nice, just being able to create so much.
You and I, man, and I've gone through it. We were really stuck at, because we got our kind of startings on YouTube with Bethesda and in particular Fallout, right? Yeah. And as well as I do how hard it is to break out of that niche. Once the algorithm likes you for a particular thing, the moment that you start veering off, it's like, no, get back on track. Otherwise, we're gonna tank your views.
I just went through that with Retro Rebound. It's
You've clearly spent so much time, like, just, you know what? No, I'm not going to listen to that noise. I want to keep grinding. And it's not just on Retro Rebound. MrMattyPlays as well. Like, remember, like, we were Bethesda and Fallout through and through. And now you're BioWare, your Xbox, your everything on that channel. Talk to me a bit about that and how hard it was to break through.
I think a lot of it was good timing too. When I was starting to break out, there were like moments, there were forks in the road, for sure. Like where, I was like living at home as a college student. So I was like, okay, like if this doesn't work out, I'm in college, like maybe I just go and pursue, put in quotes, like a normal job, right? Like if this doesn't work out, so I may as well just like go and make what I want to make. And, that kind of led to a little bit of breakthroughs. I think it was really a game of inches over the years of just like reestablishing myself. I think that was a lot of it. Like, you mentioned like we start off as Bethesda and Fallout, and luckily Bethesda covers such a wide umbrella that then we'd go into like Wolfenstein and Doom, and like we just cover Bethesda generally. And then from there, it was just RPGs for a while. It's like what RPGs are coming out. And then from there, it was like, okay, Xbox bought these RPG developers, so let's talk about Xbox. And then Xbox reached into another wider net. And so now it's kind of at the point I always wanted to be at, a decade later this year, where, you're kind of talking about everything. Like, you want to, I don't think everyone needs to have an opinion on everything, but, when there's a subject I am passionate about, then being able to dive into that is really nice. But it took some time. And I brought up Retro Rebound earlier because like, we just went through that where I really got heavily experimental. I mean, YouTube slapped me on the wrist. Like our views went like right into the shitter. Like it was just awful. Like the word, like we've been building that channel for 3.5 years, just past 200K, but it went through a stretch where it was the worst we'd ever seen it. Because we went off track from what we typically do. And I was just like, well, I want to know. And I think even if you try and fail, it just informs you a lot. I think a lot of people see like for those who don't do YouTube, when you upload, you'll see like they'll rank your videos against themselves. Like the 10 out of 10. And when you see the 10 out of 10, you're like,
the worst thing,
you're like, career's over, worst feeling ever. If you try to ignore that noise a little bit, you can just learn a lot, is what I'll say. You learn a lot more from your failures than honestly your successes, because success can kind of come randomly. Like you can just have one video pop off and you have no idea why, but failure is consistent on YouTube. Like there's a patterned beast to it that if you kind of study that and through your audience, what kind of switches you can and can't flip at that time, mind you, that's kind of how I found my breakthrough, if you will. It was just kind of like, just seeing the opportunity, I guess, right? Like, oh, Bethesda got bought by Xbox. Like these two are going to be directly connected. Like obviously any audience interested in Bethesda might want to know what the hell Xbox is going to do with them. What's going on with that? And so that conversation just, kept evolving. But I think consistency is the only other thing I tell people all the time. It's just like, if you hang with it, anyone can do it. Like I'm not special. Anyone can do it. Like it's just a matter of really like sticking with like consistent, at least weekly uploads, and you'll eventually get where you want to go. Like I think a lot of people scapegoat the YouTube and its algorithm for sure. Guilty as charged did it 5 minutes ago. But it's just, a lot of it's also like YouTube will reward you for just being there often. Yeah. Which makes it tough to walk away, of course, as you know.
No, absolutely. But talking about success, man, a video that you uploaded recently, which did really well, was your Avowed review. And I want to talk to you a bit about Avowed because I also played it as well. I got the opportunity to review it. And nice. I think, and I said this to you off camera, I intentionally haven't watched your review. I know that you were a bit more on the constructive, negative side, let's say. Sure. But I wanted to have that fresh conversation with you on here because I'm coming from the perspective where I didn't actually mind Avowed. I thought it was solid. Mm-hmm. So tell me, bro, you playing Avowed, what did you think?
Well, I'm curious, how much time did you put into it? I put 40 hours, a little over 40 hours into it.
Well, funnily enough, like Steam tells me I put 40 plus hours, but I think the actual play time, because sometimes you leave it running, I think it was actually like 35-ish. Okay. So I just got to the fourth area, but I've been taking my sweet time, man, because nice. I wanted to make sure that I ticked off absolutely everything before I got to the next level, because I wasn't worried about, I really need to finish this game in its entirety to do a full proper review, because that's just not my content. Yeah. But I see why you needed to get to the end to be able to say, all right, now I can do my proper review.
It helps you draw a line. 35. Yeah, because there's games like Veilguard that I reviewed where I'm glad I saw it all the way through, because you get to see the potential by the end of what it could have been. It informs a lot, right? Yeah. We had a couple weeks to review it, so I kind of just cruised through it at a pretty healthy pace. Some reviews do have you kind of crunching down. I've been trying to walk away from that completely. I got KCD too, with 2 weeks, and I was just like, I'm not going to slam. It's unfair to the game. It's like, I'm not going to
No
slam
way.
100 hours into this thing in 2 weeks. Like, it's just not fair to the game. It's not fair to my life. You know,
Correct.
It's great to be able to play games a lot, but to Avowed, I think what's happening is I don't want to use such strong terminology. I think there's a little bit of like a writing crisis going on in gaming. And I score games, if you will, heavily with writing. It's something that if anyone's watched any of my reviews, the games I'm most critical of, it will come down to gameplay, but it's usually the seasoning. Like, it's the extra bit on top, the cherry on top to like the characters in the world. Cause I feel like it's such a big piece of what gets, at least to me, invested, and many others, is that fiction and how real it can feel. And so in a game like Avowed, it was strange because I did think it was good enough. But Avowed is coming from Obsidian, and Obsidian has made my favorite RPGs of all time. You know, they've made KOTOR 2, of course. Fallout New Vegas needs no introduction. South Park Stick of Truth is hilarious. And I mentioned it in my review, but I was like, look, they're not a product of like yesteryear or whatever. They had The Outer Worlds just come out. Pentiment was also excellent, because what happened in this wave of criticism for Avowed is, number one, a lot of people are enjoying it, which is great. But number two is people are saying like, oh, well, that old Obsidian's dead. I'm like, that's not true. A lot of their former staff that made their games great, even recently, are still there. So this was a strange moment where I played a game that I thought, well, this should be a home run. I doubted them with Grounded, and I was like, this is excellent. I doubted them even just a touch with Pentiment, where I was like, oh, I thought it was going to be more Disco Elysium like, but I was blown away. I was like, this is such a Josh Sawyer game. This is excellent. So to go from that into Avowed, where I'm like, well, now Obsidian's in their bag. We're talking about their genre, like, and to me, like, pioneers of that genre, to kind of walk out and be like, oh, the writing was not as inspired. The characters, particularly the companions, did not grab me.
Sure.
Some of them are missing companion quests, even, at least in my experience and from other reviewers I talked to.
I found that too. I didn't know what was going on. It was just Kai. And I was like, what the hell?
It was Kai, and then there's one more, but the other two, and particularly one of them was the one I was most interested in, that I think could have raised above based on her story. I was just like, I don't know what's going on here. It feels very uneven. And when you know that Avowed was a multiplayer game, you can only speculate what happened there. That the transition from multiplayer to single player may have been more rigorous. And in a lot of ways, these companions feel like they were originally the playable party that, other players would just fill the shoes as, like, oh, someone's playing as Kai. And then they had to become characters. And so a lot of it feels hastily written. And that's why I didn't really go super hard on the game, because I'm just like, I know, especially based off recent releases, when Obsidian has their time and is writing from start to finish a single player game, what happens. And maybe that changes by the end of the year when we hopefully get The Outer Worlds 2, where maybe it's like, oh, they really have slipped a little bit. But I feel like this is a lot of a product of a project that had to be converted. And again, Veilguard really informed a lot of that. We saw that attempt to transition from multiplayer to single player. It's tough, but to your original question, it's a lot of it, you can find fun in the gameplay, I think, and the wandering, even those feel a little bit compromised in my opinion, but really it is that dialogue, the character banter, the reason I feel like we're there, right? These are 4 party members you're like on a journey with. And so to have them not be interesting in many ways was a bummer for me, because I'm just like, well, what am I here for? I don't want to talk to any of these people right now. So that's kind of where I sit. I'm curious where you're at, because I know I didn't want to dominate it with negativity, but it sounds like you're enjoying it more. So what do you like about it then?
I think the big thing for me is combat. Like, I wasn't going into this thing and probably I should have, like, given Obsidian's background and the titles that you've mentioned with KOTOR 2 and New Vegas especially. I don't know, man. I was just going in with pretty, like, I don't think I really had any expectations whatsoever. And I went in there, and there's this game where the combat feels really good. It feels heavy. Bunch of different combat styles that you can try out. You can respec at any time. There's freaking wands. There's giant axes. There's guns as well, which, a game that kind of looks and feels like Skyrim in a lot of ways.
It's cool.
It's a little weird, right? You can throw grenades too. So like I went in there, was like, all right, let me try it out, see if it's fun. And I really enjoyed the combat, like the moment-to-moment combat of finding new enemies, killing them. Leveling is a little bit slow, but I also do like the skill trees. And again, being able to respec at any one time. It's freaking beautiful to look at. And I was a bit torn on Outer Worlds, but I still appreciated how there are these big areas. It's almost a curated experience, but there was a lot to see and do, explore. My favorite thing, man, every time I found a unique weapon, whether it was like doing a quest and getting it as a reward, or just stumbling upon this random area, finding a gold chest and this awesome unique, nothing is more satisfying. So awesome. The dialogue and the characters, I totally get it. I mean, I wasn't even letting the voice actors finish their lines. I was just skipping past, but I was still reading everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Once you get it, then that's it. Yeah.
Correct. And so that's not really what I was actually like, not caring or wanting from the game. I just wanted a fun game where you could freaking shoot spells with your wand and play through, and I enjoyed it for that reason. So I can understand where you're coming from though, especially because you've got that embedded history with Obsidian. You know how good they can be with writing. Were you a big fan of Outer Worlds, out of curiosity?
I love that game. I'm learning that a lot of people, and based on what you said too, like a lot of people didn't like it that much.
I was going to say, yeah.
And that's what's strange is like, well, maybe I'm the problem. I don't know. I think the Outer Worlds is really fantastic, though, especially with its DLC, which, funny enough, Carrie Patel, who directed Avowed, did direct one of the DLCs for that. That was like her first experience as a director. So I feel like you can feel a lot of her like design philosophies bleed into Avowed from that game. So it's interesting to see a lot of people were kind of lukewarm on it, because I remember at the time it dropped, it was like Fallout First was a thing, and everyone was like, oh my God, this subscription service for $76, like, no, we can't have this. And here comes the Outer Worlds, and it's like, this is what we want. So I wonder if some of that hype was a product of that kind of zeitgeist, and when the actual thing landed in people's hands, they were like, it's all right, like, you know. But for me, I really thought it delivered. I thought the choices were great. I always say Parvati's like one of my favorite characters in gaming. I think she is just
she's great.
So brilliant. And just I think the world and the ideas, the themes, like it's almost like a non-failure to me. Like there's no way you can fail with this sort of concept. And I do prefer sci-fi over fantasy, so that adds a little on top once it's all said and done. Avowed, though, you're right. Like it does have good gameplay systems, like especially the magic. Magic's awesome. Right.
It's cool. It's
like,
so
looks
cool.
really good.
Yeah.
But the melee, I played as a Templar with like pretty much a battle mage. Like I had heavy armor, two-handed sword. I went to a two-handed hammer, and I would just swing away for big damage and blast people with like fireballs if they were at a distance, basically.
Hell yeah.
It was awesome, but I found this ability, Barbaric Shout, which
I love Barbaric Shout, bro.
Oh, it's so overpowered to the point where I was this kills combat. And when you combine
think it kills combat? So are you talking about the fact that it's so quick to build up stun?
Oh yeah. And then like
it's ridiculous.
And then you just like fly through, unless they're. I also have a little. We talk about it too. Like I have a little bit of an issue with how they kind of laid out the difficulty per zones, because like you're always pretty far behind, and so the enemies feel really spongy. So it feels like Barbaric Shout is the best way through that. But then you're not really fighting anyone. I'm just auto stunning people, doing that final hit attack, and then knocking them down and repeat over and over and over. So I did switch it up by the end of the game, because I was like, well, I'm like, was this me? Or I'm like, I feel like the game should be evolving, or at least tested enough to expect me to walk through like 3/4 of the game this way. Where I did switch to the mage, because I was like, I just want to, like, even if I die more, it's like, I just want to try to have some fun with it. But what did you think of that scaling system, like the tiers?
No, I completely agree, man, because every time you come, especially when you come into a new area, your companions are constantly yelling at you like, oh, your weapon's underpowered, your armor's underpowered. I'm like, well, I know, but I can't do anything about it. Like, sure, I can get some upgrade materials to get me from like in the tiers in between those kind of like categories, right? So, but even when you get to the third tier, you still can't go to the next level where your companions stop yelling at you because it's so hard to get Ardra, right? You've got to do certain quests or find certain chests to be able to get it. And oftentimes I wasn't able to fully upgrade the weapon or the unique weapon that I really like or the armor that I really like pretty much until the end of that zone. And then I'm off to the next zone anyway.
And you got to rinse and repeat. Yeah. Correct. And sometimes you got to go back a zone to get the upgrade materials that are exclusively there to then go forward. I'm just like, what is this, man?
It was a little bit weird. And honestly, that's kind of why I went down the great sword route with barbaric shout to build up stump, because I was like, how the hell am I gonna compete otherwise? But I will say magic was very fun once I experimented a lot with it. But yeah, no, I agree. It was a little weird, and I don't know why they designed the system like that. I guess that was their attempt at level scaling. There's no level scaling; it's a bit different, but effectively, it's kind of the same thing, right?
I think it comes back to the whole multiplayer idea, right? I'm like, this doesn't matter if you had like 3-4 other friends running around and, you know, just hitting the same enemy over and over. You can kind of override those bullet sponges. And granted, you have these party members, but mine never really did anything.
They didn't do anything. No.
They kind of stood there. And when I did watch them hit them, it was for so little damage that I was like, their abilities would be helpful, but they, even with the upgrades to those abilities, like the cooldown took a while. So I think the ideas within the gameplay are really good. Like, obviously, you know, like I really liked base game Starfield. Like I guess, if you will, I'm a defender of parts of that.
We'll talk about that later. Trust me, we will.
but I did leave that game wishing I could wander, right? Like, I want to be on the ground, walking around, looking around. Just, that's what I want, right? And Avowed gives you a little bit of that. And in especially in like the first zone in Paradise, I'm like, oh my God, yes,
so
like,
good.
Yeah, you know, I always remember like climbing up this tower, finding a rare weapon there. I'm like, this is what I think of.
I remember that exact tower, man. Yeah. I was like, this is the best game in the world.
Yeah, I was like, oh, this is like the ES6 experience I kind of thought of like 5 years ago, but I'm happy it's here now. And so it's weird because those areas become like less and less geared that way. Because again, I'm sorry, I don't mean to speculate so much, but I'm like, did the multiplayer design mean that like when these zones were so open that sometimes like you'll have that moment of climbing the tower, no loading screens, like it's all kind of seamless, and then you'll go into a cave and that's seamless, but then there'll be like another cave that you'll enter, and it's like a loading screen, and it's a pretty barren dungeon. It's again, it feels confused at times, and it to be frank, it does feel like it, and they did a great job when you look at it that way, like, but it does feel like a salvage project. Like, that's kind of what this is. Like, you know, they saw, I think as a business, the opportunity to make money on this thing. They're like, hey, if we push through and like turns into a single player thing, like most of the work's done, let's just polish this thing up, ship it. And I mean, based on early player counts, it's always hard to gauge with an Xbox title, but the reviews are coming in pretty positively from fans, which I think is the verdict that really matters at the end of the day. And so it looks like they might have a success on their hands, which, I mean, Obsidian games people tend to flock to anyway, right? So I hope that's the case, despite, you know, a lot of the conversation around the game.
Yeah, well, I think this does lead nicely into Xbox more generally, how they are judging success and just how they're doing as a platform holder, a publisher, and obviously housing so many developers. Can I get your take on how do you think Xbox is going right now? So you touched on Avowed's review scores. I think it's very positive on Steam, 81 on OpenCritic. Flight Simulator, I think, did okay. Not so much Ara History Untold. Age of Mythology was good. Hellblade was interesting for me. I don't know how much of a commercial success it actually was. So solid games are being reviewed solidly across the board. But what do you think about Xbox right now and just how they're going?
Well, when it comes to their games, for me, a lot of their tentpole things have missed a little bit. I did like Ara. I know Microsoft Flight Simulator was like, I think it's recovered since, but I know at launch that was like a disaster because of the servers and it being like online only and stuff. Just people were really unhappy with it. But I'm glad that game recovered because the first one was like huge for them. Hellblade 2 though was a miss for me. Like that was one that it's funny when I did an hour preview of South of Midnight, and a lot of that experience was like, oh, this is kind of what I wanted from Hellblade. Like this is like, you know, the mixture of narrative and gameplay. And you know, when Hellblade 2 was just more of Hellblade 1, but I think in a lot of ways worse. I was like, you know, for the wait and the anticipation, I think a lot of fans are being let down. I try to just remove myself from all of that and just look at the game as is. And I just thought Hellblade 2, to do a second Hellblade was like, I was keeping an open mind because after the first one, I'm like, I feel like this is a really good, tight-knit story that was wrapped up very delicately. And I don't know if you just open Pandora's box by doing a second one, because now they're like teasing a third one. I'm like, okay, that's not what I expected. But Xbox is in an interesting spot because, you know, right after Starfield, I would have been like, you know what, man, like outside of Redfall, 2023 was a great year for Xbox. You got Hi-Fi Rush, a new Forza Motorsport. Starfield did really well as a top 10 selling game that year. Like, granted, it's tough to get stats on Xbox games, but if you're selling in the top 10 in 2023, mind you, right, with like one of the best years of gaming, I'm like, okay, that's really good sales for Starfield. So things are going right to some extent here, it would seem. And for them to start off that new year and be like, all right, so we're pivoting, we're doing multi-platform, you know, especially when finally the ABK deal was done, it felt like Xbox fans had this moment of like, yes, we're going to turn the corner now. And we're going to finally have like the platform, like we waited. And now's the time. There was definitely a lot of emotionality. I mean, I'm sure you saw like on social media, man, like legit meltdowns from people when Xbox was reportedly going multi-plat. Now it's like Xbox just ripped the Band-Aid off completely.
It's done. They're going and specifically, I had this on my list of notes to chat with you about. Can I get your thoughts on their multi-plat strategy? Because like I'm coming from the perspective of like having some game dev and game industry experience. Very much Xbox is in that third spot when it comes to platform holders. Like they're behind Nintendo, they're behind PlayStation. So I completely get that hardcore Xbox fans wanted them to keep, you know, with that exclusive strategy. What's been known in the industry for years, what Nintendo's probably going to do forever, what PlayStation's, they're releasing more of their games onto PC, but they still have a lot of exclusives, right? And especially after the ABK acquisition, especially after the Bethesda acquisition, I'm sure there are a lot of Xbox fans that are like, yeah, this is it. We're going to get a bunch of exclusive games that aren't going to go anywhere else. We're going to have a reason to buy our Xbox, right? But then when you look at it, them being third in that spot and how hard it is to have conversations being the third most sold platform out there with other developers trying to get exclusives, I can imagine how difficult it is for them. And now that they're behind the 8 ball, what do? Do they just keep trying with this good? Like, were they ever going to surpass Nintendo? Were they ever going to surpass PlayStation, keeping with that strategy? Or do they try something different and bold by just releasing their games wherever else people are? Because that's very much the path they were going down. Like, they were opening up screens, Game Pass, PC Game Pass, everything. I kind of get why they made the decision that they did, because ultimately, especially in the short term, it was the better financial decision for them. Sure. But can I get your opinion though on their multi-plat strategy?
Yeah, we call it the Eye of Satya, right? Like I think the Eye of Sauron, right?
Yeah.
Like you know, and when you buy something like ABK, you went from the little plaything at Microsoft that they're like, oh, you can make us like a couple $100 million a year, cool. Like you keep doing your thing. Okay, you're going to make the biggest acquisition in like tech history. All right, we need our money back. And I think they had a timeline, and they kind of, after that money was spent, and you see like, I think it was after Starfield, the numbers came in and like Game Pass increased by like 1%, content and services increased by 1% was the stat. I was just like, Starfield was called the biggest driver of Game Pass subscribers in a single day for that service's history. And it's a popular service with like tens of millions of subscribers now. I'm like, and that moved you 1%, and that was by all accounts a very successful video game, whether people like it or not. Like it just was a very successful game. I'm like, that spells trouble, right? And so I look at that and I'm like, it's tough to argue with that. Now emotionally, like I grew up with Xbox exclusives, and I think of them as like, especially the original Xbox and 360. I'm like, man, like there is going to be a part of me that's a little sad because they did fund these crazy games. I think of Death Row, Voodoo Vince. I think of Lost Odyssey, just these Xbox exclusives for generations that, you know, Sunset Overdrive, we want to go into Xbox One, Titanfall, just making these games possible. So at first I was a little bit like, I get it, but OG Matty is kind of fighting with this thing. Then you start to see the business reality. And honestly, like a lot of it was informed by two things. Like one, Xbox is still funding cool things. Like they helped fund Kunitsugami, Path of the Goddess. They helped fund Ninja Gaiden 4. Like Ninja Gaiden 4 is crazy. And so on. The other thing was just like getting some game development experience under my belt and kind of recognizing there's a difference between like making a thing and what you think about when you're making the thing versus when you're playing the thing. And so when I'm making a thing, I'm like, oh man, I want this to be everywhere. I want everyone to have it. But my consumer side of my brain was trained to be like, well, this is the business. This is the realities of the business. But when you're making something, it's like, of course I don't want to be like, here, only you get this. Sometimes that has to be the reality because like you'll accept an exclusivity deal and that's the way you kind of put the game in a safe area or the company that's developing it in a safer area. And then you release it later. Like sometimes that's just how it's going to go. But Xbox is embracing a future that, we saw what they did with the Xbox One. They thought we were all going online and they were right. They were just a decade early.
They went too early. Yeah.
So now they're like, you're all going multi-plat. We're doing it first. And I think it's going to, the thing is I don't think the move is bad. What I took issue with now, as I like think about it more, is like Xbox has this whole, we've read reports that they're working on this kind of shared ecosystem UI that, if I'm playing on my PlayStation or my Switch or whatever, that I'll be able to access some sort of Xbox ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's just the steps they went in of being like, okay, we're going to do this podcast. We're going to go multi-plat with just these 4 games. Then you announce Indiana Jones and you're like, we're also putting this to PlayStation before Xbox fans even got the release date. Then you do that. This is an Xbox campaign. Then you have Satya Nadella saying like, we're going to bring our things, everyone multi-plat, Phil saying another thing. And then you just see the hard commit. They're just like, okay, Forza's going. Hellblade 2 no doubt is going. Starfield's going to go. Everything's going to go.
Everything's going to go.
Everything's going to go now. Yeah. It's just been the Achilles heel of Xbox has been mixed messaging. And that is where I struggle because I'm like, look, if this is your vision, that's fine. But why are you rushing this vision? Are things so truly desperate that you've had to like on delay? Like we got to go because if we don't get this out now, I don't know what happens to Xbox as a brand. Who knows? We don't know the story. If there was like that sense of urgency there from them to be like, hey, we don't have time to communicate to anyone really our plans, like to the point where we're in 2 months going to be just 1 year removed from Xbox sitting down at that podcast, that business update going like, it's just these 4 games. It won't be Starfield. It won't be Indy. To Phil just doing an interview a couple of weeks ago and being like, I have no red tape around any game. Any game can do what they want. That is a dramatic transformation. We see that over the course of years. Xbox did that in like 8 months, right? So long diatribe aside, it's just one of those things where I get why they're doing it. I just wish that they like, the obvious thing would be like, here's the ecosystem with those test games. So people get a better picture of like, here's what we're doing with our games moving in the future. But for them just to drop 4 random games and shut down studios as well, like they just put themselves in that evil villain role that they honestly never had to be in. And a lot of it was just order of operations. They forgot PEMDAS. How could they forget PEMDAS?
You just would have preferred for them to have if you had a particular vision and strategy, that's what you want to do. Just go for it. Don't sit down and say it's just going to be these 4 games, and then in the back of your head knowing that that's probably not true. You just you thought that they should have just gone full, just rip the Band-Aid off, put everything out everywhere. If you think that's the future of Xbox, just be confident in that and don't send mixed messages. Ultimately, that's the big issue that you have.
Yeah, basically, because it's hindsight 2020, of course. It's easy to say now, but because there still would have been the emotionality, the struggle, the why are you doing this? Like all these questions would have still happened, but if you could have seen a better, clearer vision of like, here's what we're doing, and again, we know Xbox is working on like a handheld and we don't really know what their hardware future is. Like they could have gradually answered those. Like, well, why should I buy an Xbox? And it's like, you can, I think, gradually answer those. I'm not saying have everything ready to go immediately, although that would be ideal. But I think just having a sort of idea of what Xbox everywhere looks like saying this is an Xbox, but in their marketing campaign, but this is an Xbox, isn't quite where it needs to be yet. Like infrastructure wise, like sometimes cloud streaming just isn't that good. All the way to just like supporting the idea of what they want to do in the years to come. I think this year we will see it because I think they're accelerating for a reason now this year and just being like everything's going. But yeah, to me, it really does come down to that layout, that communication, and less the idea, although I fully admit I would have wrestled with it either way because it's just such a dramatic change after what everyone thought was like a great year for Xbox. It was like, they had quarterly major exclusives. If Redfall didn't flop, I think it would have been like a year that we look back on fondly in every way, shape, and form and be like, yeah, this is the Xbox we wanted, like consistent exclusives. Like this is why they bought all those studios back in 2018. Obviously like a very different ball game now, but it was just, such a huge pivot that I think there would have always been a strong reaction, but I think there was a way for them to mitigate it a little bit better.
Well, you touched on Bethesda a little bit and Redfall. I'd love to spend the last bit of this episode talking about Bethesda, where they fit into the bigger picture and just what they're kind of doing. Like, obviously, as a publisher, if we can still call them that, Bethesda is full focused on Doom: The Dark Ages. That's going to be the next big thing, which looks freaking sick. I am more keen to know what you think about Bethesda Game Studios in particular and kind of what they're doing with Starfield, what they're doing with Fallout, what they're doing with Elder Scrolls. What's the go? Like, do you feel they've been a little silent as of late from that camp?
It's a tough question to answer, dude. Like, you and I could go on for an hour on this.
We could. Yeah.
Like, obviously, they're my favorite. Like, I'm always going to be cheering for them. I want them to succeed more than anybody because, like, mean, obviously, I don't hide it. Like, just an emotional factor, dude. Like, you and I are sitting here because of their games. Like, that just doesn't go away. There's a huge part of that. After Shattered Space, it was the first time my confidence in them felt rattled because Starfield wasn't this abundance of love for me. It was like I had to learn to love it. I was like, okay, this is different, but this is also stepping away from a lot of the things that they do very well. And I don't think the trade-off is very good, but I still like it a lot. But I don't know if I'm going to go back to that game in the ways I would Fallout or Elder Scrolls. Shattered Space, though, was like, they're going to show everyone. Like, they're going to tell everyone, like, no, we got this. They go back to their bread and butter. And when it didn't, did you? I think I remember you did a review of it. Did you end up not liking it, or?
I wasn't the biggest fan. There's a lot of thoughts that I have about Shattered Space. I think the biggest things that come to my mind right now is it felt like I was just going from character to character and having these extensively long dialogue conversations, and I'm like going on and on and on, and I didn't know how I felt about that. And then when you actually kind of take a step back and look at the DLC, it's like initial quest, you're doing these 3 things, the main one, and then you're done. Yeah. That's kind of what it was, right? Like explaining it quite loosely like that. And I actually didn't mind the base game. You and I, when we were reviewing Starfield, the base game, we were like, yeah, this is actually like, I'm enjoying this. This is good. It was different in the sense that you're going planet to planet, exploring different stuff. But with Shattered Space, this was almost like their attempt at, no, we're going to go back to basics. It's one planet, one area to explore. That's kind of what you want. And then because of that, did Starfield lose a little bit of the magic that it might have had before? I'm so torn on Shattered Space.
Yeah, you can argue. I've said to people, I'm like, I think it made me like base game Starfield a little bit more because I'm just like, whoa. I was like, guys, come on now. So that was the first time it's funny because I know people are gonna be like, well, what about 76? But to me, I'm like, Bethesda didn't miss from Morrowind to Fallout 4. 76 comes along. Obviously, that was just complete chaos. But Starfield, I'm like, okay, we're not doing multiplayer anymore. Like, this is your core single player game. Like, this is all you guys. So to me, it's like bump in the road is a big bump in the road, but still a bump. So with them now, it's like, okay, we've had back-to-back kind of or, oh my God, this is not good at all experiences. And now it's the worst time for it to happen, to be frank, because now up next is the game we've all been waiting for, right? It's time for ES6. And like, instead of riding this high where it'd be like, oh my God, they just like smoked us with Starfield. They delivered great DLC. Like, they're just hitting all the right marks. Instead, it's like, oh, this company feels spread thin. Starfield in some areas felt underfunded. I definitely feel like the budget was not big at all for Shattered Space. And now you've got to go do Elder Scrolls 6 and make this the game worth a 14-year wait. Probably by the time it comes out for over 15 years. It's a really tough ask, man. There's very few games that do deliver on that level. I think of games like even Cyberpunk, which got there, but I mean, the core product was so good. It took a while though, right? It took them 4 or 5 years. So it's just, it's tough because I want them to thrive, but I have to look at them with some skepticism and be like, all right, you got to earn it. They're in the earn it phase now, especially when I view companies and developers a lot like it's the human experience, right? Like, we'll make a mistake. Okay, I fucked this up. How do you make it better? Like, it's about how you respond to it. So when I see like Phil Spencer and Todd Howard being like, yeah, we were kind of thinking that the reason Shattered Space didn't click is because like we gave the buggy away for free, and I'm just like, that wasn't the reason. Yeah, it's like completely wrong, dude. Like, and I know Todd's smart enough to know that wasn't the case. So you don't know if this is like shareholder speak or just like deep down they know what the real reason is and they're telling Phil something else, because it was Phil who spoke on behalf of Todd. You don't know.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, but it's one of those things where it's like, okay, and now you're not, obviously Emil Pagliarulo had his run in with like fans on Twitter where people are like, okay, so Bethesda leadership also might not get it on top of all of this. So it is a time where like, I think people are rightfully skeptical of them, even if it pains me to say, because it's like, again, I want Elder Scrolls 6 to be everything we want. And people deep down, even though the internet can be cruel, deep down people want Bethesda to go back to their prime because they're the only company I know that like gets roasted when games like theirs come out, even if like they had nothing to do with it. Like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 came out, right?
Yeah.
And everyone's like, well, I hope Elder Scrolls 6 is better than this because this is kind of like what we always wanted. Like that reactivity, the great writing, the combat's like intuitive and so on. That's what I've been seeing a lot in my community and online, and to the point where I'm seeing people like make memes of like if Bethesda made KCD, and it's like a bunch of loading screens. It's kind of funny, but it's cruel, but it's kind of funny.
It is made. Yeah.
But to my point is, I am a little worried about ES6, but the reason I do have a semblance of hope is I'm like, look, this is the only thing they're looking at right now down the pipe, and they've said for generations they're like, we're waiting for the right technology to do ES6. So I'm hoping that whatever they were waiting for is worth it, right? Like I don't even, can you like, do you have any ideas of what that may be? Like any guesses,
I honestly, no idea. But here's the thing, Matty, like Todd was saying similar stuff about Starfield. Like we were waiting for the technology and and they made the improvements to the creation engine. And at the end of the day, and so many people make this argument about Starfield, they didn't like it. Like, oh, they just need to ditch the engine. Like the things that were bad about Starfield, it wasn't the engine. Like let's be real. Like that's not the issue. I actually don't think creation engine is the issue. And if they got all the tech that they needed in the world for Elder Scrolls 6, I don't think that's actually going to make the game suddenly amazing in many people's eyes. It's coming down to characters. It's coming down to dialogue. It's coming down to questing and just how the game flows. Like technology, sure, it's going to be great for it to look amazing and for different systems to be there, but if there's anything that games like Baldur's Gate 3 and Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 have delivered on really successfully, it's the dialogue, it's the good story, it's the character development, it's all that kind of stuff. That's the kind of stuff that Bethesda needs to work on for ES6. And I saw all that criticism with Emil, and I think a lot of it is a bit harsh, but maybe they do need to have and you touched on before with Avowed, maybe they do need to look at how they approach their writing, how they approach their storytelling, because ultimately I think they're going to be able to nail the exploration aspect. I think they're going to be able to nail creating the world. Like you and I talked about this, and even though I know like, you've soured on Fallout 76, the actual map, the world is freaking
76
awesome.
is in a great spot now. Yeah. Like
it's in a great spot, right?
Yeah. And even the base game map was always pretty good. Obviously it was what was within it and the problems within it, but like I'd say by Wastelanders I was like, okay, like it's not for me, but like this is definitely a good corner turn. They salvaged it, right?
Correct.
And it allowed you to look at parts that were already in the vanilla game and go like, oh, these were always pretty decent, right? So I'm with you that I feel like the exploration and stuff, like even though Shattered Space should worry me a little bit again, I feel that thing had to be understaffed just by the quality and like you mentioned, the way quests were designed. It just you can just tell at a certain point. I could be wrong, but with ES6, it's like I imagine most of their best talent is working on that. Where it's interesting. What do you think they do for year 2 of Starfield? Because Todd did promise like we're gonna do another expansion, at least one more, and I'm like I don't know. Like especially after Shattered Space, I thought it was gonna build the story more, and you kind of didn't. I'm just like.
Dude, they were saying every 6 weeks that Starfield's going to get an update, that we're going to have these big expansions. And I really feel like the reception to Shattered Space was so on the negative side that it kind of like just took their energy out of it. And they're like, you know what, we're just going to focus on Elder Scrolls 6. That's fundamentally what I believe is happening. Because even I think you're correct. And when you look at the resourcing and the staffing of Shattered Space, because in many ways, it was a little bigger, but it kind of felt like a Fallout 76 expansion.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? Like in terms of like the amount of content that was there and the way that you're moving from thing to thing and the way those expansions are so isolated and don't really touch anything else. They kind of approached it like that because like Shattered Space, because it was like this, you have this spaceship, you're going off to this random planet, and nothing that you do there affects the rest of the game. That's kind of how they approached it. So I don't know, man. I really want there to be more with Starfield, but even the modding scene isn't like as pumping and as thriving.
I was wrong about that. Yeah. I thought that would be like, I was like, yeah, this game may underdeliver, but it's going to be like a modder's haven. Like they're going to figure it out. Like they're going to be Star Wars overhaul mods and all that shit. And I'm like, yeah, even the modding community, in some cases, like high profile modders are like, I can't do this. Like this game is not good. And, Bethesda's nothing without their community. I mean, it's just Steam, but the Steam player count after Shattered Space for Starfield is really sad. Like when you look at it compared to Skyrim, which it's like, okay, it's a generational game. Fallout 4, 76, all of them,
it's the same thing,
much higher. And at a certain point, I'm glad that they've at least publicly stated they're proud of it, but there has to be a quiet look in the mirror moment. That's all I'm hoping for. Is like, if you want to have all the bravado online and go to war with people on Twitter, I don't think it's smart, but go for it. But if like deep down and when you're making Elder Scrolls 6, like, okay, we need to like, this feedback is correct in most places and we need to adjust based on what people expect of us and themselves. Like that's all I feel we can hope for at this point with Elder Scrolls 6. I wonder what happens if it doesn't deliver, but I feel like, in a lot of ways, it feels like it's going to be extremely difficult for them to deliver when there's, number one, a consistent underdelivery from them, and also like a lot of the industry is just against them at this point. It's a huge uphill battle. Where they're really going to have to like put out their best work ever, I think.
But I think in many ways, like, I know that they can't afford to fail, but also because it is Elder Scrolls 6, like, there are so many top 5, top 10 lists that I see of the greatest games of all time, and Skyrim is consistently there. Like, I don't think Elder Scrolls 6 can actually fail. Like, even if it's an average game. We saw Starfield. Many people didn't like it. Top selling game in the US. Performed really, really well, like financially, commercially. There's no way that Elder Scrolls 6 can fail in that regard. Even if it's in that regard, game.
I don't think it. I think by namesake alone, it's that game that, even if all the reviews are like 2 out of 10, people are like, well, I'm still going to check it out. I just got to see.
Of course.
It's just that sort of generational video game, right? Yeah. And in the sense of like how Elder Scrolls comes around and when it does, like, I mean, it's going to be a massive, like, oh my God, like when everyone has the same story. When Skyrim came out, we were all in completely different phases of our life. To be going back to Tamriel in traditional fashion, unless the game just presents horribly, it's going to be one of those moments where I think everyone's going to turn their head. And what's interesting is it's easy to get lost in the post-Starfield conversation now. The pre-Starfield conversation was really positive, though. It was like a lot of like, they're doing the right things, dialogue focused, questing. And I really do think it comes down to
consequence.
And those were in the base game. I know that's like a hot take for some people, but I'm like, I think when it came to factions and storylines, like that was the last problem I had with base game Starfield. I just thought it was quite good in a lot of areas, like really good. But it really shows that like that seamless sense of exploration is so important to their experience. Like they can never let that go again. If Starfield's reception is anything to go by. I had one question for you about Elder Scrolls 6. I know, what was it? It was about, do you think it's going to, how big do you think the game is? As in like all of Tamriel? Is it a specific region? Is it 2 regions? Like, what is your guess on that sort of thing? Because
for Elder Scrolls 6?
Yeah. I keep, because I think this the speculation is Hammerfell. But I was looking at a map and Hammerfell's like right next to like High Rock or something. Like they're connected by an ocean. And I'm like, I could see Elder Scrolls 6 having like boats and being like, go between these 2 regions. But at the same time, like they did all this procedural stuff for Starfield, and I'm just like one big Tamriel, which I don't want them to do. But I could see them getting crazy.
I do not want them to do that because, like, part of the reason, like, again, I like base game Starfield, but you are spending so much time in menus. And if you want a space game where you're going from planet to planet, there's almost no other way to do it. But because of how much time that I spend in menus and like it felt finicky at times, I don't want that for Elder Scrolls 6. It's funny that you mentioned that. I'm playing Assassin's Creed Black Flag right now, and I just want like I'm constantly like fast traveling to my ship and sailing and whatever, and it has its own, uniqueness about it. But part of me is just like, just give me a big world that I could just freaking run around. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I really hope that they don't do that with Elder Scrolls 6. I hope it's just like, no, let's just do what we did in Fallout 4. Let's just do it with what we did in Fallout 3 and Skyrim, obviously. Just a big world. Todd's going to want to make it as big as possible. Like, how often does he come out and say, it's 1,000 planets? You see that mountain, you can walk to it.
We made it smaller, actually, this time instead.
You'll
never do that.
It's going to be bigger, like size-wise, map-wise, than Skyrim, to answer your original question. I just hope that they don't try and bridge the gap with, like, it's another land that you can go travel to or whatever. Save that for a DLC. Don't do that in the base.
I agree. I think this needs to be traditional Bethesda in every sense. Like, one map, one region.
No chances, no risks. Yeah. No voice protagonist.
They were thinking about doing that for Starfield. I'm like, are you after Fallout 4 in that conversation? I'm like, really?
No.
I don't have that worry for Elder Scrolls at all. I was like, that would be like dead on arrival for a lot of people. They'd be like, there's no way I can get into this now. Just playing as someone in this world. But I agree with you. Yeah. Just like traditional BGS. With like evolved gameplay systems, because like one of the best surprises with Starfield was like the starship combat and movement was very good. I was like, you know what, this like for the company that couldn't get horse riding down in 2011, like this is just we're talking about two different developers at this point. I'm just like, this is unbelievable. So I'm like, let them make a boat, let them cook in Elder Scrolls 6. Let's see what happens.
But Matty, they spent so much time. Like, you can go so down the path of spaceship building and all the parts and everything. I felt they spent a little bit too much time on it, in my humble opinion.
Sure.
I would have preferred another freaking 3, 4, 5 faction quests, or like another big set of storylines or whatever it might be. Don't get me wrong. I thought the spaceship combat was fine, but like that's not. I was doing it kind of in between. That was not what I was there for.
Yeah.
Not necessarily because it was it was a Bethesda game. I just want to be able to walk around, explore, play, and do quests. So the spaceship combat was fine, but I thought they spent a bit too much time on it. In my opinion.
That's fair. No, I get that. Yeah. I just feel like, because here comes really the last question.
God.
Settlement mode. Do they do it? I mean, because the reason I'm like, they always bring things forward. They've brought settlement mode forward for 3 games now. I thought it was just Fallout 4. I was like, this fits. This makes sense. This is great. 76, I'm like, okay, community driven. I can accept it. Starfield, I'm like, this is so out of place. I used it once or twice just to test it and see.
But it was like, half baked, Matt. Like it was and it was weird because you have so many things to build and decorations and tables and everything in Fallout 76. So to go from that to Starfield, where I was like, I can barely decorate this place. I had no intention of wanting to do it. I know that Bethesda liked to have that one new kind of system with Fallout 4 settlements, with Starfield or with spaceships and spaceship combats.
Yeah.
I know that they want that one thing. I don't know, man. I would prefer them to just focus on the game. Just go back to basics and do what we love.
I agree.
Skyrim, the base game, didn't have a settlement system, and it was one of the greatest games of all time. Right?
They had the DLC.
Just do that.
It technically started with Skyrim, didn't it? Like it technically started with
Half-Life, right?
Yeah. It technically started there. So that's why I'm just like, oh dear, this could be like the craziest full circle moment. I was just curious where you stand.
Do something different. Like I don't get me wrong. I think they're going to allow you to. They might let it for creations. Like, we're going to work with modders. They're going to like do this really cool, settlement system or house building system or something. That's all I want. I just want my small little house by the river with a fireplace and whatever.
Buying a house. I'm cool.
That's it. That's all I need. Like, I know that there are people that are hardcore into the settlement building and whatnot, but ultimately, it's a nice to have feature. It's a cherry on top. It is not. If Elder Scrolls 6 didn't have a settlement system, that's fine, so long as the rest of the game is good. But if the rest of the game is bad and the settlement system is great, it's still a bad game.
I feel like here's my hot take is that I feel like they're gonna make a city builder. Like, I think they're gonna be like, you don't just build a settlement, you build a city in Tamriel that has like its own ecosystem and NPCs. I do think they're gonna try to carry. Right. That's gonna be like they're carrying a mile thing. Like, I think it's gonna be like guess what? It's back and it's bigger now. And I'll be like, oh shit.
You can give birth to 1,000 citizens.
Like, I do think that's going to be the game, because I think they like to find the game within the game, right? And I think settlement mode was like their big idea for Fallout 4. They just haven't let go of it. I think it's got to be a money thing too, right? Like the creations and the DLC. Like there's got to be something there where they're like, this is just great business for us. But I'm with you. I hope Elder Scrolls 6 is free of it. I just don't know if they'll let it go. I don't know.
We will see. And I'm sorry, I've kept you here for so long, by the way. We're like, it's going to be a 30, 40-minute episode. It's almost 50 minutes later.
But that's fine.
But before we end, I do have to ask you about Fallout, right?
Yeah.
There has been so much pressure, especially with the success of the Fallout TV show, for Bethesda Game Studios to do something with the IP. And obviously, they're working on Elder Scrolls 6. What do they need to do? Is Obsidian the answer? Is another dev the answer? Like, there's no way they can make it internally. So what do they do with Fallout? What would you like to see?
It's so interesting because Obsidian just got the lead writer of New Vegas back. Like, they just hired him again. He already confirmed, he's like, it's not New Vegas 2. I'm like, because it's not going to be called New Vegas 2, obviously.
Yeah, it's going to be called something else.
Yeah. So I was like, you're being coy, although that's just speculation. I'm kidding. But you still have Sawyer. You have Fergus Urquhart. I'm like, whether you like or hate Avowed, I'm like, the combination's there and it's pretty fierce. And I'm like, you don't really get this opportunity ever. Where I'm like, I don't know how Obsidian goes the rest of this generation without at least announcing a Fallout game. That's, I think, just because there's so many places they could hand it off to. Like, would I give Larian the license for Fallout? 1,000%. Easily. Especially in I would have done it beforehand, but especially in a post Baldur's Gate world where like Microsoft can look at that and be like, oh, people do like this kind of RPG, like where the camera can be in the sky and you can pull it in a little bit closer. Because that's kind of like back to the roots of Fallout. And Swen Vicky did say in an interview, he's like, I would have worked on Baldur's Gate, Fallout, or there was one other license.
I remember that. Yeah.
And when I saw that, I was like, pick up the goddamn phone right now.
But now they want to do their own thing. That's why they've left Baldur's Gate.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm not holding my breath. But my point is, like, there are great RPG developers out there, but Xbox does have this in-house option where the talent that made the thing people loved is still there, still making RPGs. They own the IP. Like, it kind of just sells itself. What do we get first, though? We get remasters, I think. Like, I think that is just, where we've heard it's the worst kept secret in gaming that Oblivion remake, remaster, whatever it ends up being, is on the way. Little trepidations about that one, just because I know that sets the tone for a Fallout 3 remaster, right? Like, that is,
they better bloody do it, man. I've been waiting years for it.
Yeah. If you put a gun to my head and was like, yo, what remaster are you getting first? I would not put Oblivion in that conversation. I'm just like, what? But I guess it makes sense, right? When the Elder Scrolls fans have suffered long enough, right? They get this fantastic MMO, but they're like, we want a single player thing. It's like, yeah, give them the old thing again. Why not? Because they've resold Skyrim a million times. But yeah, I just with Fallout, I think that the path is the remaster. I feel like that is, if I'm in the business suite and I'm thinking about how do we get something out quick, compared to a full AAA production cycle from the ground up, while Bethesda's working on Elder Scrolls 6, which is, I have to say this, even though I love Fallout, arguably more important. So it's like,
for them right now it is. Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
So I'm just like, how do you do that? It's like, well, Avowed's done this year. You've got Outer Worlds coming out this year as well. So their RPG teams are going to be free.
It's crazy.
Stars kind of align, right? It's just like the talent's there and free, and you have the license. It's just the right fit. But I think that takes 4, 5, 6 years to get out the door. And so you're looking at really remasters and even though when I talked to Todd, he shut it down. Like, I hope that they do like re-releases of the older ones as well. Like Fallout 1 and 2 just coming back to like consoles, I think would be a decent deal for people to be like, okay, like have Night Dive do it, touch it up like they did with like System Shock or whatever. And just bring it to modern fans. Like, I think there's ways to satiate Fallout fans. And in that case, like, many people haven't played those older Fallout games. Like, give them a new experience without like milking the series dry. The Fallout TV show is going to be a big part of it. 76 having like a huge base now, bigger than ever before, I think is going to be a big part of it moving forward. So I think we're going to get a lot of Fallout, but it's so funny because like we watched the show Like for me, I fucking loved it, bro. I was like,
so
this is
good, bro.
so good. I'm just like, there's how did this work out so well? Where obviously everyone went into a Fallout craze. They're like, we need a game now. But I think what happened with Xbox and Bethesda in turn was like, we don't know how people are going to feel about this. Because
100%, man.
Exactly. Because everyone was like, why wasn't something ready sooner? I'm like, well, imagine a world where it comes out and it's ass and it hurts.
What if
brand.
it's bad? And they had a Fallout 3 remaster to go with it. Like, hindsight's always 2020.
Exactly. So I fault myself a little bit. I'm like, nah, they did the right thing by not green lighting until it became like the #1 show in America. But I mean, Todd's pretty much indicated that there's like 2 projects ongoing outside of obviously Elder Scrolls 6 that seem to do with Fallout. So there's stuff cooking. I think there's a lot they could do with the IP beyond just like traditional mainline open world stuff. Like I do think it's ripe for spin-offs and fun different ideas. People love the Pip-Boy minigames. Like make a Pip-Boy minigame collection, right? Kind of like a WarioWare style experience, but for Fallout. I don't know. Like there's just that brand is so big now, it can be explored in that level of like nuance and detail. So I hope they do. I
just think, like, sure, I totally understand. We just talked about it before. You don't know if this show is going to be good or not. You're not really banking on it, so you're not going to have anything necessarily prepared, aside from 1 or 2 small things and skins that they did in 76, right?
Yeah.
But now you know how big the show is, right? One of the top viewed shows last year, or the year that it was released. Like, you know that season 2 is probably going to be a success. You trust them now to create an awesome product. There needs to be something now. And that something can't just, again, be an expansion or something with 76. Sure, like a mobile game or something else small would be cool. And there's no way that they can develop like a Fallout New Vegas style spin-off in time. It's just not possible. Yeah. So remaster. I know Todd in his interview with you said that it's not really on the table, but they've done it with Skyrim. The Oblivion one is rumored. Why can't they give it to a Night Dive or someone else to remaster Fallout 3? Why is it not possible? And it's just it would be the perfect time.
I say with all due respect to Todd, I don't believe him though. I'm just like
I'm not saying he's a liar. Yeah, right. But
like I think obviously like that's a question I ask him where he's not going to be like, actually we are working on these things. It was more like I wanted to feel out what his no was going to be. But and I just got the vibe. I'm like, there's no way you guys just let this thing like. I get the whole philosophy that they have at Bethesda. Like, it's important to miss things. I'm like, well, there's missing things. And then there's like, this thing is insanely popular and the show is not a substitute for the game, no matter how good it is. Like that, they started as a game franchise. And while we can wait for the mainline stuff, I think it's popular enough to get fed every couple of years, something new. I mean, dude, I was thinking about it the other day. I think I was talking about a video. We had Fallout 3 in 2008, then it's DLC, New Vegas, it's DLC, and then Skyrim and it's DLC. Like, what a stretch.
Those were the glory days, man.
Yeah,
those
right?
Are the best times.
And it's funny because when New Vegas came out, we were all like, oh, it's Fallout 3 2.0. It's like, we would fucking kill for that now.
Yeah.
It'd be so much better. But, we just, now we know what we've got. We know we love it. And so I think it's just, it's funny that they didn't even think before the TV show, like, if you're like Xbox, it's like, hey, like we bought Bethesda. Out of all their IP, Fallout and Elder Scrolls make the most money, and they've just done nothing of major consequence. To their credit, as much as we want them to do these things, I will say, as a compliment to Xbox, they really do let their devs just do what they want. Maybe sometimes to a fault, because I think the time it took for like a Hellblade or a South of Midnight will lead to no doubt underwhelming people, because it's like, bro, they bought you in like 2018. You took it this long to make this, like 5 hours of gameplay, 12 hours of gameplay. That just doesn't equal out in people's heads, even if they don't know the process, and you can understand that. So I think Xbox is a little too lax at times. So I wonder if they'll ever do a little belt tightening and be like, all right, I know you don't like remasters, Todd, but we did see those FTC documents. You had Fallout 3 remaster at some point on the docket. Did you consider maybe doing that at one point? Maybe we should greenlight that again. And obviously New Vegas has to come after that. If you do Fallout 3, you got to do New Vegas. So I think if you're trying to buy time, that's a quick way to do it for sure.
Yeah, but ultimately, I would love to see a proper spin-off. Like, unless somehow BGS fundamentally changes how they're structured and how they develop games as a studio, we know that the Fallout 5 is not going to be coming. And I don't even want to mention and talk about Starfield too, but Fallout 5 is not going to be coming for another like 8, 9, 10 years, right?
Right.
At best. Yeah. So unless they fundamentally change how they built, like Obsidian does. They're working on Avowed and Outer Worlds 2 at the same time somehow, right? Somehow they're releasing the same calendar year, which is kind of crazy. Unless they do that, they have to give the IP to another studio. There is no other way that it can work.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at mainline entries, I mean, the fact that Fallout 4 is 10 years old this year, bro.
Don't say that. I'm making me feel
old,
right?
Bro. Isn't that crazy? Fallout 4 is 10 years old this year. And I'm like, dude, what you just laid out is a very accurate assessment. And I'm like, so you're telling me it could be 2 decades before another mainline? That's not good portfolio management. I get Bethesda want to have their cake and eat it too. And I get like Starfield, it was its time, and now it's Elder Scrolls. Like their timeline makes sense, but you're right. Like there just is a level of like, as fans, like we're not all around forever.
It's like, too long, man.
Yeah,
like I don't want to be in my 40s when I'm playing Fallout 5, which is crazy to say, but I probably will be. Like I was in university when I started like doing the rumor and speculation videos for Fallout 4, right? That was a time ago. Like I barely remember my times. Like it was so bloody long ago.
Yeah.
And now you're saying it's going to be probably another 8 years, 9 years until you get Fallout 5, the next game in the franchise. Just crazy to me. It's just it's crazy to say out loud, and it makes me a little bit sad. But it's only because I want to see them do well, and I want to see these games from them because they're still my favorite studio.
Yeah, same. And just Fallout's my favorite IP in general. It's like, of course I want more of that. But I think there are fun ways to, again, do spin-offs. Like I have this, I really don't share this idea because I want to like, my dream is like to just put this in front of it. Even if they say no, I just don't want to give away the idea.
Don't say it then. Don't give it away.
No, that's what I'm saying. I can't say it, but like, I think there's just ways you can rethink Fallout beyond like first person shooting and playing as like a lone wanderer or whatever. And that sort of thing. Like, I think there's ways to look at Fallout differently and explore it as an IP that just Bethesda doesn't seem to be aware of how to do. It feels like at times, like, because I think the remasters were like a easy after Skyrim special edition, like, put those out on modern platforms. But, we're talking next year, maybe for Fallout 3 remaster, if the kind of timeline from the FTC document lines up. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah. But
that's how they get their money, I think.
Now.
Yeah. They have to have like documents inside that and analysis that goes, when we make them wait, I mean, remember, like you and I were buying. I still have the mini nuke from the Fallout anthology leading into Fallout 4's.
I got mine there too.
Re-release. Yeah, dude. Like it's just the amount of merch I bought because I was like, oh, finally I can buy Fallout stuff. Was crazy. I was surprised they didn't really do it at the Fallout TV show, but I didn't find much like quality, unique merch after that show. Because again, I don't think Bethesda was ready. Like this could bomb.
There was some stuff that I saw of the characters, but like they didn't go crazy with it like they did, like they still do with Fallout 4, right? Like they really amped up their merch game a lot, and I really appreciated it.
Yeah.
But again, I think it might go back to the fact that I don't know how confident they were that the show was going to be a success, and once they realized it was a success, let's do merch. Like it felt, and I could be wrong on this completely, but it felt like all of the merch followed how successful the show was. Right? They didn't plan any of that beforehand, and they probably did to some extent, but that's just what. Yeah, because they
like redid the Nuka-Cola Quantum. I think they put that out before the show or something like that, if I remember correctly. Yep. Yeah, there wasn't much though. Like the only thing I saw that caught my eye is they took the ghoul and they made him into like this really cool statue. That was one I saw on the Bethesda site, and I was just like, I might buy that. Yeah, I love him as a character. And I just want to honestly get all of them at this point. But that was the only thing I almost went crazy for. But yeah, dude, it's just like interesting to see how they handle that license. And honestly, you could say the same for Elder Scrolls. I always neglect Elder Scrolls. I always say, like, as much as I love it, like I'm selfish as a Fallout fan because I'm like, Elder Scrolls fans will hear me talking and be like, bro, it's been since 2011. Shut up. Like you may have got a bad Fallout game when it launched, but like it was still a new Fallout game in 2018. Like it's been since 2011. I'm like, I hear you. I understand. I'm just being a little greedy right now.
But to be fair on you, like, Fallout 76 still getting content. So is Elder Scrolls Online. Yeah, it's one of the best MMOs going around right now. You could play that if you want an Elder Scrolls experience. It is actually good.
Yeah, 100%. So it's just there's so that's why I can't help myself. They're just so fun to track because I'm like, you never know what the hell they're gonna do. You never know.
Yeah. But Matty, man, it's been really awesome speaking with you. Well over an hour. I appreciate you. I know how late it is for you right now, but Man, thank you again. And everyone knows who you are, but I'm going to ask you to do this spiel. I'll include all your links in the description below. Sure. Where can they find you? What do you do, bro?
Sure. So you can find me on MrMattyPlays if you want to hear me talk modern gaming, we'll call it. You know, news, discussions, reviews. You can find me over there doing that. If you like older games, older conversations, that sort of thing. But I would say, to be frank, because sometimes modern gaming is like the tough talks. If you want more lighthearted, good energy, happiness, go to Retro Rebound. Go to Retro Rebound. You'll have a lot more fun there. That is definitely the place that we just get to like not worry about anything. Like the sky is not falling over there. And then that's really, of course, Defining Duke. If anyone is interested in what's going on with, I guess, Xbox as a publisher, more so than a platform holder. We run Defining Duke and Xbox podcast every week. You can find it on the Last Day Media YouTube channel every Sunday. And that's a lot of fun there. You can join me and Lord Cognito there. But thank you for having me, dude. This was a ton of fun. Of course. It's I'm getting flashbacks again to ham radio because I remember we had to go around your schedule where you would get up really fucking early and I would go to bed really late every time we did the show. And I was like, oh my God, I forgot about this part where we like be recording till like 1 a.m. and I go straight to bed after the show. And I'm like, this is just complete deja vu. So it's been awesome doing this, bro.
I'm really glad, and I'm glad that I could do like the first official launch of the podcast with you, man. Yeah. Of course, at some stage we'll get you back on. I've got a kind of like a list of guests that I want to go through, including like industry people and devs as well. But I really appreciate it, brother. Yeah, I'm planning some stuff. We'll see. We'll see how this first episode is received. If it freaking, tanks, then maybe I think about other stuff. But I personally, like with the MMA podcast that I do, I really enjoy conversations like this, and just probing and asking questions. So I appreciate it, brother. Thank you so much. Of course. And if you are still watching at this stage, it's been a very long episode. I really appreciate all the support. Love you. Like, subscribe if you are new. And until next time, this has been Lone. Please take care of yourselves, and would you kindly keep fighting the good fight.